Hi there. I'm going to do a review for Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This movie came out in 2008. It was directed by Steven Spielberg and partially written by David Koepp and George Lucas. This movie follows the adventures of Indiana Jones again, only this movie is set sometime after the events of, well, any of the other three movies. Those all three were set mostly in the 1930s. This movie here is set in roughly 1957, so right around the time of Sputnik. Um, More or less, the story goes is that Indiana Jones is going to do a bunch of stuff. The set piece thing at the start was interesting, involving apparently a nuclear test, and somehow they have a situation go on. Oh yeah, it starts out with Indiana Jones. This time it's the Russians. In the first three movies, it's Germans. This time it's the Russians, of course, because the Germans don't really exist anymore now. Now the Russians are the new arch nemesis of the United States. So they end up with the usual problems. More or less, Indiana Jones meets up against this woman who's like a truth sayer or whatever. It's kind of a different kind of movie to watch this time because it actually does feature a nuclear detonation in it. Of course, because they have nukes now, and somehow Indiana Jones gets into the midst of a nuclear device. More or less, what happens is that the opening set piece happens, and he ends up wandering out in the desert, and he finds this town, this village, and of course, have a scene. But more or less, what this is about is the fact that the the Russians and the Americans more or less figured out that there's some place somewhere that's got might have extraterrestrial origins. It's a temple. It's like a pyramid. More or less, both agencies are trying to figure out where it is and what it does, and it's more or less about how there is more or less potential archaeological digs to do in this area. It's a pyramid, and they more or less have to try and seek the refuge there. They have to figure out how to get there. More or less, the Russians are led by a woman played by Kate Blanchett, and she's got like this supposed Irina Spalko is her name, and it's so funny because she's supposedly like capable of reading minds, which actually isn't even remotely accurate. I'm not sure how she got the position that she got, but nonetheless, it's good. It works, and it's kind of an interesting little story here where more or less Indiana Jones finds out he has a son played by Shia LaBeouf, his name Mutt Williams, and they gotta find out more or less they're trying to investigate into these crystal skulls, and more or less just another archaeological dig like the other Indiana Jones films. This one, though, is a totally different storyline than the other ones. This one's actually involving aliens somehow. I don't know how this one got involving aliens. And they just decided, let's do aliens. And it's kind of a curious film. Not quite as cute or interesting as the first three films. In fact, I think a lot of people just do not find this very interesting at all because it's too much of it's too much of a too late, too little, too late for a movie about Indiana Jones. The other films were set fairly close to each other, more or less of the time period. This movie here, not so much, and that's where the problems really start. Is that they don't know how to do this film. Like this film here has some confusion in it, I think, because of course Jones is much older than he is in the other films, so he's trying to play the same character as before, only to find out, of course, he's not quite as young as he used to be, and he can't quite do the same stunts. it leads some funny and some just plain awkward sequences where he's trying to replicate old maneuvers. And nonetheless, it's an interesting film because they have both groups are trying to get to this kingdom of crystal skulls, and of course, more or less, there's a whole bunch of stuff here. Eventually, Indiana Jones meets up with his old flame. What's her face? His old flame from the first Indiana Jones film, the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Karen Allen playing Marion Ravenwood. Kind of an interesting meetup. Not really any point to it. Doesn't really mean anything. Instead, what you get is a whole bunch of I don't know. It's got some cute stuff in it. There's a few moments that are unique. The difference between this one, and the other earlier ones, I guess, is the biggest difference is that this one features some CGI visual shots that definitely couldn't have been replicated in the earlier films, and so this one has a little bit more enhanced visual effects in it than even the Last Crusade does. But nonetheless, it's a movie that does feature some significant visual effect shots, including a rather heavy-duty scene involving must be what looks like glorified lawnmowers because they're having to cut through the brush to get to this location. Kind of looks like an awkward scene. I mean, supposedly that's how this scene is working. It's kind of a silly scene to say the least, but nonetheless, it works. Nonetheless, it's fine. I don't know. When there's a lot going on in this movie in terms of the fact that they do have to deal with radiation because when Indiana Jones finds himself in the nuclear blast radius, he has to decide he has to go through a radiation shower, stuff like that. That's new. That's a little bit different than the earlier films. Didn't have to worry about that stuff. But nonetheless, this film is ironically set a good deal after the other films. It's been a long time because Indiana Jones is quite a bit different than he was. They do make references to World War II, of course. Given the fact that this one takes place like so many years after the events, I don't know why they keep making oblique references to World War II, even though the war has been over for years. Yeah, but nonetheless, it's not too bad of a film. It's definitely not as good as the other films. I think that's the biggest problem with it is it's being measured up against the other films. But nonetheless, they have this unique situation with finding the crystal skulls, and of course, the woman finds out that that having pure knowledge is not all it's cracked up to be. In fact, the aliens, of course, have a sense that she's not idealistic, and they gave her too much knowledge. And that's I don't know. They end up with the right track. I don't know. It's kind of almost a write off of a film. It's kind of interesting at first viewing our first two viewings, but once you get past that, it's just not up to par with the other movies. It's kind of not really as regarded as well as the other movies. More or less, there's not as much going on here. Again, this isn't quite as interesting because the background of this movie isn't quite the same as the other ones. The other ones had some background to them. Even the Temple of Doom had something for its people to do. This they're trying to figure out what to do with them because, of course, these aren't based on the same concepts. So yeah, they do run into this problem with these movies. But nonetheless, it's a decent film. Doesn't have too much trouble with itself. I don't know. It's not too bad.